Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. Just last week, or maybe it was the week before, I put together a video ranking the vice captains of the Soul Society arc from the weakest to the strongest. Make sure to go and check it out if you haven't done already, it was a lot of fun. But a few characters gave me some trouble. And as I pored over the details while putting the video together, one in particular made a compelling case for why I needed to revisit them, perhaps in a separate video. I ranked Nemu Kurotsuchi, the vice captain of the 12th Division, at 6th on the list, and I wasn't wholly convinced by it. The fact is that while Nemu doesn't get too much to do during the Soul Society and Rankar arcs, by the time of the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, she's quietly become one of the series' most impressive vice captains, capable of feats the majority of them couldn't even dream of. And yes, I'm including the likes of Rangiku, Hisagi, and possibly even Renji in that statement. Frankly, this version of Nemu is able to output at a power level that eclipses most captains in the arc too. It's kind of ridiculous. Nemu's moment in the spotlight is admittedly fairly short-lived, which I think makes it easy to overlook her. But that's another testament to just how powerful she really is. Mayuri and Nemu versus Pernida is a major fight in the final sub-arc of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, so we're talking the absolute last stages of the story, with the two of them taking on essentially a god. Or at the very least, a piece of a god. And while it takes absolutely everything Mayuri can muster to just keep up with Pernida during their frantic and, let's face it, excellent battle, it's not quite the same where Nemu is concerned. Remember that at this point in Bleach, we're dealing with Yhwach's Schutzstaffel. Absolutely the strongest enemies we've ever seen, barring Aizen himself. These guys are all archangels, and yet Nemu tears through one of them like a wet paper bag. And so, in this video, I want to revisit those comments I made during my ranking to give them the time they deserve. How strong was Nemu during the 1000-Year Blood War arc? What heights of power did she reach, and how was she able to do so? At her peak, how does she compare to the rest of the Gotei 13? And did she have access to this power during the Soul Society arc? To get us started, what exactly does Nemu do to earn such a discussion in the first place? Her actions can't be that impressive, right? Well, in the early stages of the Varvelt sub-arc, which makes up the final slate of chapters in Bleach, Mayuri and Nemu come up against Sternritter C, the compulsory Pernida Pankajaz. Initially a very mysterious Quincy, Pernida is revealed to be the left arm of the Soul King himself, making it a godlike deity within the world of Bleach. The left arm symbolizes progression, and it embodies that in its abilities. A terrifying arsenal that sees Pernida able to forcibly control everything around it, as well as adapt and evolve on a near-continuous basis. Mayuri's track record in Bleach is pretty good for the most part. Sure, he suffers a devastating defeat against Uryu in the Soul Society arc, but it's a Pyrrhic victory for the Quincy. Uryu loses all of his powers as a result. But after that, Mayuri pretty much enjoys a clean sweep across the rest of his fights, defeating both Xyloporo and Giselle with ease. So it says a lot when Pernida pushes Mayuri to the absolute brink, actually injuring the captain and forcing him to break out the big guns over and over again, as his various schemes fail to secure him the win. And yet, anything else would have felt weird. Pernida should be on a totally different level. As a piece of the Soul King, Pernida was never granted powers by Yhwach. Its shrift is completely nominal, only there to reflect the abilities Pernida itself already had. It's a creature of divinity, and so when it outmatches Mayuri and threatens to kill him, it's shocking, but not altogether unexpected. As Mayuri suddenly realizes towards the end of the fight that Pernida is able to evolve once its nerves come into contact with something, taking on attributes of those that it touches, he notices Nemu currently in the line of fire, unaware of Pernida's true capabilities having evolved after coming into contact with Kenpachi Zaraki. Screaming for her to run, Mayuri, however, is caught off guard. Pernida's main body frees itself from Mayuri's freezing serum behind him, utilising the skin-shedding power of Mayuri's Matai Fukuin Shotai to get the surprise drop on the captain. With Mayuri helpless and about to be grabbed by Pernida, something changes in Nemu. The vice captain looks up at Mayuri, horrified. Her father figure, as brutal to her as he used to be, is about to be killed. And so she kicks into gear in an unbelievable fashion, unleashing a power the likes of which we've never seen from her, or really any vice captain. Blasting off from the ground like a literal rocket, Nemu leaves a crater in her wake as she hurtles towards Pernida. Reaching Mayuri in the blink of an eye, Nemu grabs her captain, but more importantly, obliterates Pernida's main body simply by bursting through it, turning the enormous hand into chunks of bloodied meat that rain down from the sky. Nemu doesn't do anything here, but fly with incredible speed and strength, turning herself into a missile with which she completely and effortlessly, I might add, destroys the Soul King's left arm. This incredibly powerful enemy that they've been struggling against for a while now has just been reduced to mincemeat in the wake of Nemu's newfound power. Can you imagine any other vice captain being capable of this, of power on this level? Could Renji, even with his Royal Palace training, totally annihilate the left arm with a single move? Honestly, I really doubt it. In this moment, Nemu is on a completely different level, and I feel like it is so easy to overlook. This whole chapter absolutely whizzes by as Nemu demonstrates her true power by walking all over Pernida. While the comparison isn't perfect, both Pernida and Gerard either literally are or house within them body parts of the Soul King, making them two of the most powerful characters in the series. For Kenpachi to damage Gerard in remotely the same capacity as something like this, he had to use his bankai. Now, I'm not saying this version of Nemu is as strong as Kenpachi in bankai. After all, I think Gerard is way more powerful than Pernida. But I mean, come on, this is the kind of power that Nemu is currently courting. And she's not done either. Placing Mayuri down on a nearby building, this new Super Nemu turns to face the remaining Pernida clone. As Pernida rushes Nemu, the vice captain pulls back her arm, and a ring of golden light encircles her wrist. Using an ability called Konpaku Sesaku, Nemu is able to shave away 6% of her soul, so 6% of her actual being, and turn it into a concentrated energy blast. By doing so, she effectively turns her arm into a cannon and blasts Pernida, the power rupturing the giant hand and once again bursting it wide open, turning it into chunks of flesh. So, for some perspective, in 2 moves, Nemu has one-shot both current bodies of Pernida. The only reason Pernida survives this blast and turns the tables on Nemu is because, as we've seen in the past, Pernida exists in all fragments of itself. One of the coolest aspects of Pernida is that, well, it's all Pernida. If the giant hand is destroyed, the separated pieces also turn out to be Pernida as well, complete with their own creepy eyes and powers. Unfortunately, this turns out to be Nemu's downfall. But there's no denying this vice captain is operating on a completely unforeseen level at this point. But how exactly does this work? How is Nemu so strong, and where does it come from? Is it realistic for her to be able to achieve this at all? Well, after turning Pernida's main body into paste, Nemu reveals to Mayuri what's going on. He demands to know where this power of hers is coming from, but Nemu explains that it's just power that he gave her. We know that Mayuri created Nemu from nothing. It was his dream to build an artificial Shinigami. Nemu says that she's extracted her body's utmost ability and is now 0.8% away from total bodily destruction. Nemu tells Mayuri that she can last another 400 seconds while operating at this output before her body is completely wrecked, presumably beyond repair. And so this is very interesting. Nemu is essentially a Shinigami, operating at their absolute max capacity, the total peak of their capability, that otherwise might have gone completely unobtainable for them. To do so, she's had to bring herself within a hair's breadth of complete destruction, but it's worth it. Honestly, it's kind of crazy that this explanation is finished within a matter of panels when the implications are huge. Nemu has effectively bypassed everything that a normal Shinigami must go through. All training, all growth, everything and anything natural has been skipped right over to reach her maximum strength and ability all at once. And then there's the psychological aspect too. Is a normal Shinigami ever truly capable of reaching 100% efficiency and power? To get there, a Shinigami would need to be inhuman, essentially. To break down the physical and mental barriers necessary to do so. Luckily, that's exactly what Nemu is. Mayuri notes that Nemu's entire purpose was to grow and evolve, but Nemu has reached a stage where she thinks she can show Mayuri the fruits of that growth by protecting him in battle. Interestingly, from the way the chapter is framed, it seems like Nemu only activates this last step in her evolution from the moment she witnesses Mayuri about to be killed, which I guess makes sense. So, on top of pushing her body to the max, Nemu also uses the Soul Slicer ability to blast Pernida into pieces. Again, is this something she's always been able to do, or does she only have access to her soul in this way when she's operating at 100%? She's already breaking down boundaries, she may as well go another step further. This power is almost similar to that of Stark and Lillinet's, with two key differences. They likely had far more soul to throw away than Nemu does, and yet Nemu's attack is considerably more powerful in the one instance we see it. Nemu is putting her life on the line here in a big way. In fact, I wonder if she's already dead by the time she's fighting like this. When I first read this chapter, I thought Nemu had extracted just enough of her power to the point where she was close to death, but wouldn't quite tip over. But I think I was mistaken. Actually, rereading it, it seems like she is resigned to her inevitable destruction as a result of having tapped into this power. She's extracted everything her body can do, and is now minutes away from death, and there's nothing that can stop that. I don't know, maybe I am still reading into it wrong, but that's kind of what it seems like to me. Honestly, it was a little surprising to see Kubo put so much emphasis on Nemu of all characters, but at the same time it does make sense. She, being an android of sorts, essentially gives him the perfect method to showcase just what a Shinigami could do if they could access all 100% of their power at once. Pernida really didn't stand a chance in actual combat. Nemu just walked all over a member of the Schutzstaffel like they were nothing, barely even giving the first hand a second thought. I'd have loved to have seen how far she could have gone, to be honest. It does seem like using the Soul Slicer ability tires her out, and you'd think hasten her body's destruction, so it's hard to tell what more she could have done. I also wonder if she even needed to use the Soul Slicer ability, or if she couldn't have just blasted through the second Pernida clone in the same fashion she did the first. Maybe it wouldn't have worked so well since this Pernida actually knew she was coming. So then, how does Nemu compare with her fellow characters? Notice I said characters and not explicitly Shinigami. Well, the reason for that is I think Nemu's closest counterpart is of course Ururu Sumugiya, the mysterious young girl that lives at Kisuke's shop in Karakura Town. It definitely seems to me like Ururu is Kisuke's own version of Nemu. Unbeknownst to Mayuri, Kisuke has also achieved the so-called dream of all Shinigami by creating his own. Ururu's massacre mode, as Jinta calls it, seems like exactly the same thing as this, only on a much smaller and less advanced scale. Unlike Nemu, who keeps her mind and personality, Ururu turns into a Terminator-style robot, focused entirely on killing those that she deems to be a danger. But like Nemu, Ururu becomes monstrously powerful, seemingly rising way above her station to completely dominate Ilfort in battle. Again, this is a much lower level than Nemu and what she achieves, but it feels like a similar situation. But aside from Ururu, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of comparison. After all, none of the other vice captains are artificial beings created by a mad scientist. What I'm curious about is whether Mayuri knew that Nemu could unlock this power, or if it's kind of come out of nowhere for him. When Mayuri built Nemu, I would have thought he would have known how powerful she could ultimately become, but his reaction to her saving him during the Pernida fight feels as though he had no idea what she was truly capable of, and I think that's the whole purpose of Nemu's character arc here. She's grown beyond what Mayuri had initially envisioned, what he believed to be possible, which is in line with how she's progressed so far to this date. Essentially, Nemu is constantly surpassing Mayuri's expectations. This is clearly a discovery Nemu made on her own at some point, and again, I wonder if she realised beforehand just how powerful she could actually become, or if it was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Certainly though, in comparison to her fellow vice captains, this version of Nemu sticks out. Even if she was only able to maintain it for a short period of time, during that time, I think she's got to be the strongest vice captain of them all, and I don't say that lightly. Sure, characters like Hisagi and Izuru might have tricky, busted abilities, and Renji is immensely strong after his time in the Royal Palace, but no one displays raw power and speed on this level like Nemu. In this instance, she was able to reach Mayuri and obliterate Pernida in the time it took for the giant hand to close its fingers, and even then it didn't manage to do so entirely. And so, there you have it. That's why it feels to me like Nemu is hugely underrated and often goes overlooked. Well, the Nemu from the 1000-Year Blood War arc at least, anyway. Like I said before, I still don't think the Soul Society or Rankar arc version of the character was capable of this strength. It came about due to her evolution, which we see unfold before our very eyes. But in this moment, in her final moments, she's capable of completely incredible, unprecedented strength, the likes of which we've never seen from a vice captain before. Nemu, with nothing but her own raw power, totally decimates the left arm of the Soul King not once, but twice, breaking a Schutzstaffel member like a twig. I remember thinking that Kubo's focus on the vice captains during the fights with both Pernida and Leal was a little strange, and possibly even unfounded, considering they are very much the series' endgame. But here with Nemu, we get to see a new ceiling of power. We get to see a Shinigami tapping into their complete and unshackled strength as they operate at 100% capacity. Something that I think is an inhuman achievement and therefore likely unobtainable for the vast majority of the Gotei 13, even if only briefly, and it's awesome. Alright guys, but that's it for the video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments down below, do you agree with my assessment of Nemu? Is she underrated? How powerful does she become in this final moment of the battle against Pernida? Is she the strongest vice captain of them all, right here and now, even if it does only last for a few minutes at max? Regardless, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on the topic down in the comments below. And as always, I want to end the video by giving a huge shout out and saying a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. If you want to help support me and the channel by becoming a member over on Patreon, you can do just that at the link in the description. And doing so really does help this channel so very much, and I really do appreciate your support. By doing so, you can get your name in the credits like this, and you can get every video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.